we are with Jaws Christ Talk. We have podcast engineer Emily Gomer, everything led by Jennifer A. Whitaker, and we have John Tarr here as one of our favorite Christians. And so, Emily, take it away. Let's go.
Okay, welcome everybody, and happy New Year. This is our first Jaws Christ Talk of 2023. And on January 2nd, 2023. And the Jaws Christ Talk is a part of the World of Ability Podcast Network that was created a couple of years ago. And I'm only one of the running behind the scenes kind of things, along with Jennifer and John Tarr and Kurt Roskopf. So I'm gonna encourage everybody to like, share, comment, subscribe to all of our social media pages and groups, or wherever you found us. And pass it over to Jennifer to get the show started.
Yes, thank you, Emily. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to Jaws Christ Talk. Sorry I have been gone. As far as I understand, the show has run, and now it's just back to me. I was out trying to get back stabilized on medication. However, I am back at work now, though I will warn everybody that there will be certain shows this month, January 2023, that we don't know the specific dates yet. Besides, I know one is January 30th, when I will be in surgery. As many of y'all know, I have epilepsy, and so I have to go through surgery often. Then I will be hospitalized at some point for a multiple day long EEG some point this month, or even end up being February, depending upon testings that are done. And in those times that you do not see me, you will see Kurt and John here leading the way and still having the show for the two there. Now, John.
Yes.
I wanted to share with you something very interesting that happened. You know how many times we modern day tend to think of Christmas and gifts, whether it's the giving or it's the opening of what we hope we get, right? So
Yes.
This Christmas, my parents and I did not open gifts yet because my relatives were not in town. As I was saying, we were at Moody Gardens in Galveston. But on our trip down there, we stopped at a Starbucks. And when we did, there was a guy inside who looked like he was homeless. And he had a very small coffee and a big jacket on, bags that looks like he tugs around everywhere with him that were worn out, like a homeless guy. So when we got in the car after getting our coffee and using the bathroom before finishing our trip to Galveston, my mom handed me her debit card and she says, "Hey Jen, here, take my debit card here and go get a $20 gift certificate or gift card to Starbucks, give it to that homeless guy." I went over to him, and as I was approaching him with the Starbucks gift card that had $20 on it, I asked him, I said, "Did you know that Jesus loves you?" He said, "Yes, I do. Indeed, he loves me." And I said, "Well, this is a gift from Jesus." And then I handed him the gift card. And I said, "It has $20 for you buy whatever you want here. Merry Christmas. He says, well, Merry Christmas to you. Now, how many would you find to react that way, welcoming the gift and confirming that they believe Jesus indeed loves them when they're going without so much stuff? Is that not just an amazing way to spend Christmas?
Yeah, that was very sweet. You just never know what angels you may entertain, or people for that matter. There have been many times that I've connected with some homeless people, and there have been times I could have swore that they were like an angel in disguise too. So you
Right.
just never know. You never know who God brings into your path, what they might need to hear at a specific moment, what physical gift they may need. And also, you know how Scripture says that God calls us all. And, you know, and then I have run in, once in a while, I've run into a homeless person, like you just said, that is a Christian too. But God just has them going through an experience in their life. You know what? Our lives are very complicated. I don't know how God sorts it all out, but He does us to make contact with the outside world. And you just never know. It's really crazy. I think I can't remember if I shared my experience right after I'd become a Christian about a homeless kid when I was in Oregon, and I was driving along the highway there. And it was an extraordinary story. It was right after I became a Christian. It was like 40 years ago. I was 30 years old at the time. And God just put us together and touched a lot of people's lives at that time. So you don't know. You just don't know. I know how God has touched me and came into my life. And because of that, most of my family have become Christians now. So it's very, very strange how all these things came about, you know. I was not a Christian at one time, and I photographed a wedding back in Chicago, Illinois, where I used to live. And I went to a wedding and photographed it, and it was they had a Jewish rabbi and a priest that presided over it. But when the proofs were ready, the groom and his brother came to pick him up, and they came and we talked for about 4 or 5 hours about God and everything, and so he told me at that time if I ever ended up in Oregon to come and check him out and visit. Am I going on the tangent here, or do you guys want to hear this?
You're doing good.
Okay. Anyways, so I got a divorce from my wife, and she was then living with my boys in Arizona, and I came up for a visit. Her and I had gotten a divorce, but I decided to keep on moving. I was in Arizona for a couple months, and then I decided to go to California where I had some relatives, which I did stop. And then I decided to drive up to Oregon, and I was going to connect with this guy a year and a half after the wedding, you know. So I remember I was not a believer at that time. I did not believe in God. In fact, I had a very bad relationship because I grew up in a Catholic family and I was abused by Catholic nuns. So I turned back on God. I didn't want anything to do with them. I used them as a cuss word, you know. So I was like that. So as I began to head, and this was around Easter time, and I started to head towards Oregon. And on the freeway, I could physically feel that something was dragging me. And I asked God, I said, everybody disappeared here. Are we connected?
We're still here, just to focus. She's
Okay.
focusing whoever's the one speaking.
Okay. So I decided to go all the way up to a town called Medford, Oregon. And then when I got there, I had to hit a smaller road, the Applegate. And I started going on, and the Applegate's a very, very small town. And like one stoplight. So when I got into the town, the first place I came to was the post office. So I parked in there and I sat in the parking lot for a couple of minutes. And then I decided to go in because I didn't know John, his name was John, and he had left me his P.O. box number, but he didn't have an address, didn't have his telephone number. So I went to the post office, and it was a very small post office, and I said to the lady, I'm looking for John, and I told her his last name. I said, he didn't give me his address or telephone number, and I don't know how to get to him or reach him, and I came a very long way. Could you help me? She said, by law, I can't do that. I can't help you with that. But she said, did you see those two hippie-looking guys walking out the door? And I said, yeah. And she said, go ask them. So I ran out the door, caught up to the two of them, and I said, I'm looking for John. And I was his photographer for his brother's wedding back in Illinois. And I said, I am trying to locate him. Can you guys help me at all? They both turned to each other and started laughing because John was their best friend. And so one of them decided to call John. John lives in at that time, lived in a very big hippie community in the mountains of Oregon. And he was the only one of the community that had a telephone. So they came him from the payphone and they said, John, there's an individual here by the name of John Tarr, said he was a photographer for your brother's wedding and he wants to come over and visit you. And I could hear laughing on the telephone, and all three of them were laughing. And he said, bring him up, bring him up. So I followed these two guys. They were on a Volkswagen bus. I had a Volkswagen bus at that time, a green one. And I followed them up. And going up the road. What?
Good old 70s vans.
Yep. And you got to remember, this is like 1979. Mm-hmm. And it's part of, like I said, a part of a hippie community, but they all live in separate units, and they all live in tree houses. That they're actually houses that are built in trees. Okay, and John's coming down from his tree house with a pathway, and then they had to cross over this little bridge with.
Excuse me, it was 1983.
What?
1983. Not 79.
1983. My wife is reminding me it was 1983. And then you cross over the bridge with us, and then there was like a place where people could cars. And by the time we got to his house, and John was standing right there on the parking area. And he had the most enormous grin on his face. And he said at the time when he had invited me, he didn't think I'd ever come. I'd ever show up. And but he said there was something about you, all the questions you were asking because there was a lot, because I was an atheist and been an atheist at one time. He understood where I was coming from, but he never thought I would go from Chicago all the way to Oregon. And here I was standing in front of him. And then when I hugged him, or he hugged me, it was like, and he wouldn't let go, just wouldn't let go. And I ended up spending about 6 weeks with him at his house and going to the little Applegate Christian Fellowship. And the first night I was with him, I had a million questions, and he answered all of them and stuff like that. And he finally gave me this book, was about that thick, and it was a history of Christianity. I even forgot who the author was. So when I wasn't talking to him or going to the church, the little Applegate Christian Fellowship was very unusual in that it was in a very, very small town, but over 1,000 people would come on a Wednesday Bible study, and there was just no place to park. John, I can't remember, his name was John, also the pastor there. And I remember sitting, when he would take me to church, I remember sitting in the audience, and when he talked about Jesus Christ, I thought he was talking to me, only me. It felt like I was the only person in that whole church, but there was over 1,000, and he was talking about Jesus Christ, and I'm like, who is he talking about? I don't recognize this person. You got to remember, I grew up in a Catholic church, so talking about Jesus Christ just was not done very much. And
you're saying in Catholic churches they don't talk about Jesus Christ, even though they pray to both Jesus and Mary and all these others?
Well, they do, Trudy, but it's a very different kind of Jesus. It's a Jesus that is the Catholic Church, as a Christian church, is very condemning. It's like, I don't really believe in free grace from God. Catholics just got to go to purgatory when you die. You got to work your way to heaven. Everything has to do with works. It's like the Mormon Church. It all has to do with works. And I thought I was beyond redemption. I didn't think there was any way that I connect with Jesus, because I felt I was so sinful, and I had such a nasty outlook towards Jesus Christ or anything that had to do with it. I just didn't want to hear it. But when I was in that church, they were very graceful, and I just, it broke me down. Here, I grew up through my informative years and in the teenage years. When I was going to college, I would go to some of these debates they had between a Christian minister or an apologetic and obviously I said that we're atheists. I knew all the arguments that there is no God. Since then, since I have become a Christian and God saved me there, and when I got back and started getting our lives back together, I started becoming part of an Christian apologetic. So it's a way of proving there is a God in the universe, that a designer behind everything. And so then when I left Oregon about 8-9 months later, I went back to Chicago and connected with some of my old friends. I lost a lot of my friends that I did have. And when they said that, I told them I was a Christian now, born again Christian, most of them couldn't believe it, because they remembered how nasty I was and how against it I was. And then when I came back to Arizona, I remarried my wife, and I had the honor of bringing my 3 sons to know Jesus Christ and my family all across the board. And they are all very strong Christians this day. And my mom was beside herself, including my dad. And then some of my old friends back in Illinois were just like, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I still don't have contact with some of my old friends, but I have a lot more contacts. And then there was an amazing story that happened a couple of weeks after all of this happened, after I became a Christian. And it had to do with my VW bus. And I picked up a homeless kid on the side of the freeway. So do you want me to tell that story a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. When I became a Christian and I was living in Medford, there's a town north of it called Grants Pass. I got it backwards. And I had joined a soup kitchen up there, and I would travel back and forth. And it's an absolutely beautiful drive. There's 2 roads you can take. One goes through the forest, and it's very small, and it's winding and all that. And then there was a road that was on a highway that directly went up there. So there was a girl that went to Medford, and I told her I was working at a soup kitchen up there, and she said, I'd like to go. And I said, I can pick you up on Saturday and take you, but instead of going the short or the long route, I'll take you on the freeway. So I picked her up, and we're driving along. And it was a very high plateau. If you know anything about Oregon, part of it is actually a high desert. And I got all the way up on the plateau and I'm cruising along. You can see forever up there. Oregon's very beautiful. Anyways, we got about halfway up the Grants Pass. My VW bus started backfiring. All of a sudden, boom, boom, it wasn't running very smoothly at all. So I pulled over to the side of the road, and I got out and I went in the back of my VW, but the engine was in the back. And I looked in there, and the engine only had 4 spark plugs, okay? And one spark plug had totally unscrewed and popped out of the engine, but the wire was still connected to it. And I was staring at it, and I was like, that is ridiculous. That never happens. How does that happen? I went to grab it and try to put it back in there, and it was way too. So I just let it go, and I started licking my fingers because it burnt my fingers. So I went back in, and I got back in the bus. I said, Connie was the girl's name that was with me, and I said, we can't go anywhere for about a half an hour because I got to let it cool down and be able to put the spark plug in it. As soon as I said that, there was a knock on Connie's window. And I looked out, and she looked over, and there was this kid. He was probably about 20 years old, standing there, all bundled up. So Connie rolled down the window, and I go, don't roll down the window. We don't know who this is. Anyway, she did it before I had a chance to do that. Anyways, he said, I'm lost, and I'm looking for a way to the nearest town. Can you guys help me? And so I opened a sliding door, and he got in our back seat. And in the course of talking to him, we found out that he had been a runaway from the Washington area about 3 years, and that he was making a living on the streets of LA. He was a male kid whore. And so we started asking him what happened.
That's almost the most people think. I guess you mean by whore, prostitute, but most people think you have to be a female to do that. I'm not saying it's true, but the mindset of many people.
Yeah, and it's true, but when you're homeless like that and no one will take you in, you find a community of homeless people that lived under bridges in the LA area. That's what he did. And then he really didn't want to be doing more, and he wanted to go home. He missed the big fight he had with his parents was like in the distance 3 years before. And he just went home, but he didn't know if they would accept him. So when I was, we were sitting there, and I said, you know what? How about if I drive you our soup kitchen, and I'll introduce you to the guy that runs the place. His name's Roy. And I said, maybe we can help you get home. So we drove. It was probably and then we got there. And then the soup kitchen area was a place that had 2 stories. And I introduced him to Roy, and I began to tell Roy what happened. If I get emotional here, you'll have to understand, because what happened next was unbelievable. Anyways, I told Roy what happened. And I told Roy that he had the kid not seen his parents in 3 years. And Roy immediately said, we have to call your mom and dad now. And there, I was standing with Connie on the outside of his office, and he had this big window. And Roy and this kid went into the room, and they closed the door. And they're talking for about 10, 15 minutes, and then Roy picks the phone and he calls. And when Roy talked to the parents first, and he says, I have someone here that really wants to talk to you. It's your son. Would you like to talk to him? And I guess it was the mother that had answered the phone, and she dead away fainted. The father picked up the phone. Apparently, after he had run, they had hired a private investigator to try to track him down, and they could never find him. Anyway, Roy says they talk, and both this kid and Roy are crying and talking on the phone and crying. This went on for like 45 minutes. Roy then says to him, we will give him money to take a bus home. And it was probably a good 400 or 500 miles away yet. So that's what happened there. And then Roy asked me if I wouldn't mind him to the bus station the next day. And so I said, of course. And then I remember leaving the office and going to get something to eat, but I could hardly eat. I went outside into the back where the alley was, and I just cried. I just bawled my eyes out. But needless to say, the next morning I drove the kid. And I keep calling him the kid, but I can't remember his name. I should have taken a picture of him, but I took him to the bus station, and he relayed the story what happened just before I pulled up in the Volkswagen bus on the freeway. And he said, there was a berm right where I was, and there was a berm, and he was laying on the other side of the berm. So I never saw him until he came up to the VW bus. And he never me, but he heard me when I pulled up. And I was pulled up right next to him. 20 miles of stretch of freeway with nothing in the middle of nowhere, and I pulled up next to him. And he said, I was laying there trying to stay warm, and all of a sudden I hear this bang, bang, bang. It was my VW bus backfiring. Okay? And he said, just before up, He said, I asked God, if you are there, if you're truly a God, if you really exist, please help me now. He said, not 30 seconds later, my VW bus makes its grand entrance. And he said he looked over the berm and he said he saw me standing there next to my engine, licking my fingers because the engine had burnt my fingers. Needless to say, after about a half an hour, I was able to screw the spark plug back into the engine and rehook it up, and it ran fine. So you think about that. God puts together a plan for two people to connect way before you're even born, way before he was even born, way before I was even born, for me and him to connect on a lonely freeway out in the middle of nowhere. And here's my spark plug pop out of my Volkswagen engine. Think about that. What are the possibilities of that? But it was a bigger story in the end, because this kid had to get home. And we witnessed to him about Jesus Christ and everything. I don't know what happened after all of that. I was in such a shock that I forgot to get some information about him and where he lived and stuff like that, because it would be fantastic today if I could connect with him and find out what happened when he got home. And did he get married? Did he have children? Did he finally accept Jesus Christ? You know, all these things. But and the fact that God, Jesus Christ, used me at a very young Christian age. I'd only been a Christian for a couple of weeks, and that he used me in that way. And I witnessed to this kid with what knowledge I had of God and Jesus Christ. I have learned so much more since then, and all the apologetics that I read about was nothing. What I knew then, I knew nothing. I just knew that God loved me. He wanted me back, and he was willing to do anything. And then he solidified it by me running into this kid. And when I went after the kid off at the bus station, the Rogue River is right near there. It's a big river that people raft. And I went and sat for about half a day on the side of the river, just going through what had occurred. And I just was like, what are the possibilities of that happening? So those were two kind of off the wall. I got a funny story, a little short one, but when I got baptized up in the Applegate Fellowship, they took me to the Applegate River. And the little boy with cowboy hat and everything, cowboy coats and everything, he was probably about 5'4" at the time. Okay, and he was the one who baptized me. Here I am, 6'4". Okay? They pulled me out in the water, and it was really rushing. When he went to put me underwater, he started to drown. He didn't know how to swim. So as he began to float away, I grabbed him and pulled him up and pulled him to the side of the road. We were laughing because here he saved me by baptizing me, and I saved him from drowning.
Y'all had quite an experience in that water. It was magical.
That's it. Yeah.
Miraculous.
Yeah. Yeah, miraculous. You know, God's got a sense of humor. That's all I can say. But I know when I came back and I brought my sons and my wife to the Lord, my 3 sons and my wife, and then I took them up to a town called Payson in a river up there, and I was able to baptize them myself in that little river up there. So God, and when I came back, there was a movie that I had watched with the whole community up in Oregon. It was just called The Jesus of Nazareth. And I think it's like, it was 9 parts, an hour in each part, but it's a very long thing. But it's the most powerful life of Jesus ever watched or witnessed. Now, if you could check it down, I found Netflix, I think it was, and it was a 9-part series that was made back in 1974. But it's so if you get a chance, watch the whole thing. Every version, every episode will just tear you apart. So when I came back to Arizona, the whole family and I watched it. We binge watched it, and everybody was crying through the whole thing. So me coming back to Arizona.
Is that
What?
movie you're talking about, Jesus of Nazareth? Is that about Jesus' life on earth? Like when he was in service at
Yeah.
age 31?
Yeah, it was from his birth all the way till when he was crucified. But they went into real detail on each of the events. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Each episode was on different things that had happened to Jesus throughout his ministry. Dealing with the when he was a child and went and got lost, and they found him in the when the whole family went, and then when Jesus created wine from water, and then all the way through his ministry with his apostles, and they had an amazing cast that was in that in the movie, but it was it's long, but it's very, very good. It's and very close to the Bible. Sometimes some of the things that they make up, they're not real close to the Bible, but this is like dead on. So if you get a chance, and a lot of people haven't heard of it because it was made so long ago, but they could not make another one. Another good thing that's out right now is a thing called The Chosen. Have you guys heard about that?
No, but I remember in college, I was one of the first to see, I think it was Christ or whatever.
Okay.
You remember the movie?
So there's a new one. There's a new one out now. They're going into their 3rd season. It's called The Chosen. And that's very, very well done also. But if you want to watch and where it doesn't cost anything, it's just called The Jesus of Nazareth. And I started watching a couple episodes of that the other night. And I was shocked at how much and how it affected me emotionally. You know, we can read a lot of things to the Bible, and a lot of stuff really speaks to us. But when you see some of this stuff actually laid out before you in visual effect, it's really different, and it really takes you on a journey. So, you know, I was a very bad person for a long time throughout my early years, and even when I became a Christian, I had.
It's not like murder or anything. You just simply were a sinner. I mean, we all started sinners. That's nothing different about you than anybody else.
Well, I was so rough around this. I had, when we talk about abortion, I had paid for a couple of abortions, and I connected and had a couple girlfriends that had them before I'd gotten married. And I had actually even took, at the time I had just met my wife, Monica, and took her to an abortion. I'm very anti-abortion now, and so is my wife. And we've been through that world, and we understand it. But I did some really bad things. I didn't murder or anything like that. I did other things that I should have been found guilty for, and I have repented from, and
But know that Jesus
From
Christ
that-
was for you for all of that. You may be
Yeah.
having a hard time forgiving yourself, but Jesus did not struggle. Jesus forgave you in the beginning when you first gave your life to Christ.
Right. And I think a lot of myself not forgiving myself was my Catholic background. See, it's been a number of years where I could reconcile my born again experience with my Catholic. I mean, that makes sense. It just thinking you have to go to confession all the time and you have to do these things correctly. The nuns were brutal. I went to a grade school and the nuns were very brutal to me. I was never sexually, I know a lot of Catholic boys and girls, especially boys, that were sexually abused by Catholic priests. And that's been a big deal the last couple of years. It's been a worldwide phenomena. In fact, it got so bad in Ireland, which is a Catholic nation, there's hardly anybody going to Catholic church anymore because it affected so many people all over Ireland and Scotland.
Yeah, but
And I feel really,
I think the part of history you're talking about actually started more than a few years ago because it was already going on for a few years before the pandemic hit. So
Right,
probably
it
like
did.
2017 when that was going on, or at least just say when it started.
right. It did. It started a long time before that, back in the 20s and 30s, actually. But the Catholic Church and everybody didn't deal with it. And they certainly didn't deal with it in my time. Now it's all came to the forefront in the last 10 to 20 years. There was a movie called Spotlight that had to do with the parish in Boston and looking into the sexual abuse of boys. They thought it was just a couple of them. And as they began to research it and everything, they found out there were hundreds and hundreds just in Boston alone. And they would go and interview the families and interview some of the priests that would talk to them. So it turned out to be a very big worldwide problem. In fact, it got so big that, what was it, about 11 years ago? There were two popes in the Catholic Church. One of them just died here about a week ago, but one wanted to quit. What? Yeah. But he was Pope first, and he did not want to be a Pope anymore. He had lost his faith in Jesus Christ. There's a movie called The Two Popes that really explains it. Anthony Hopkins is one of them. And he had a confession. And one of his confessions was, I did not do enough to protect my flock. And I allowed a lot of these priests to move on to another parish. And he realized that was the wrong thing because it just started the whole thing all over in a new parish. And then, so he wanted to quit, and he did quit. It was an ex-pope, but and then the other pope took over. But it was like one of the first few times in history that the Catholic Church has had two popes. So even then, I believe God dealing with that. I'm not a Catholic. I'm not a Roman Catholic anymore. I'm a born again Christian. And then I did a lot of study in like William Lane Craig. These are apologists that really have debates against other Christians, or they have debates against us or scientists. It really takes you in a really powerful direction. I needed that because the God of my life was science and evolution. That's where that's where I believe human beings came from, was evolution. The Cambrian explosion, which is something that happened 650 million years ago, It's empty of all progressive fossils, and they don't know why. The scientific community can't figure out why all those fossils have disappeared. It just fits in the first place. There's only two ways that life is formed on our planet, and one is evolution, and the second one is God designed it, and the intelligent designer is behind everything. Now, I connected with.
Have you ever watched the what's that show called? There's a show that's on the History Channel about aliens. Do you know what show I'm talking about?
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
So the series that we saw on either New Year's Day or it was New Year's Eve, but one day this weekend, said actually science has proven that the tale of Adam and Eve really was true in scientists, but they also have proven that for the creation of humans, and then from there having different foundations as far as towns that are founded and so forth, that there were already creatures and animals of other kinds. So they actually showed in their research with professionals that like research the rocks and fossils and all, different types of historians, they were able to prove that the idea of the world being so many millions of years old and like the dinosaurs existing before the Ice Age and all is true, but so is the Bible, and that humans somehow came to the earth without being in any way evolution, but they were actually just randomly came to the earth as those two humans and started reproducing. But they showed that that was an ice age, and before that were dinosaurs. But other than that, they also showed at one point that aliens from other worlds at one point dominated this earth. So that's what that show actually has shown through research of people that were trying to argue the case of what you're talking about. So the real truth is somewhere in the middle. That's ultimately what it is.
Yeah, and it's true. Well, the Bible talks about the sons of God had sexual relations with the women's of women of I can't remember the name, but they had sex with angelic beings, had sex with human women, and they created a whole race. But if you follow that, then Noah's Ark came after that, and God wiped out that whole race of beings because they were basically monsters, giants, and that was not what God had for us. I know we don't have a whole lot of time to talk about this, but I'm pretty well versed in some of this stuff. And maybe we can talk about it another time. The story of evolution.
We're down to 1 minute. We're down to 1 minute. Can you take note of this? And let's pick this up on in a week when I see you again on here.
Yes, let's have a discussion about it because it's very interesting, and the church really doesn't talk about it much at all because they think it scares a lot of people, but it shouldn't because God's still in control. He is still controlling.
Talk about it because we need to be the people that put it out there that it's not a battle between evolution or I should say in general science versus faith, but the real truth being in the middle of them, be intertwined.
Yes, you can have faith and you can have believe in science. Both they both interconnect really well. So let's talk about that. Monday. Yes. Yep. So let's talk about it. That maybe that's why God has got us connecting on here, so we can talk about it and tell other people about it, right?
Exactly.
Jennifer?
Bring our two minds together.
Yes.
Emily, it's to you.
Anybody have any announcements that they would like to share with everybody?
John, do you have
Maybe
any-
our announcement.
Yeah,
Maybe our announcement will be to talk about this stuff.
There you go. Emily, would you like to do
So, the International Day of Happy 20th, the Happy Neighborhood Project is having a event a few days before that on St. Patrick's Day or March 17th to celebrate the International Day of Happiness. The event goes from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific or noon to 6 p.m. Eastern with speed networking, speakers, prizes, vendors, and so on. Tickets right now are $30, but will go up in a month to $40. So encourage everybody to get their ticket ASAP. Also, we are trying to break the Guinness Book of World Records with the most people speed networking at one time. So encourage everybody to join for that as well. We're hoping to get the record right now is 1,068. That was set in 2014 by Belgium. So we'd like to get way over 1,068. So you can go to hnpabc.com/IDH to get a ticket and find out more information. So over to you, Jennifer. You have anything?
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Wherever you found us, please be sure to subscribe to Jaws Coffee Chat or wherever you may have found us on somebody else's show or somebody else's channel. If you want to look us up, Jaws Coffee Chat on all the podcast apps. And if you want to learn more about us, you can go to jensbooksandmore.com. That's JENS booksandmore.com. There you will find our books, services we provide, and prior podcasts, video episodes. You also find our newsletter and other information. Then again, that's JENS booksandmore.com. Also, we are looking to hire a social media marketer and a virtual assistant. We are also looking for somebody in public relations that can do press releases and possibly help with the blog, other writing related such as social media or SEO and so forth. If you believe you're fit for any of those, or you would like to be considered to have a percentage of the profits in your compensation for being a co-host or co-producer or some other help in leading and producing more shows than I personally am, then you can also go to our link. So whichever one of these you have interest in, you can get on our calendar by going to calendly.com/JENNS books and more. That's CALENDLY.com/JENNS books and more. And if you are interested in being on our show as a guest speaker or as having your own show, you can register. You can claim your your spot on our calendly.com/Jaws Coffee Chat. That's calendly.com/JAWS Coffee Chat. And that's how you schedule to be on our podcast, a guest speaker on one of our shows. However, if you're interested in having a show about your business, nonprofit, member group you represent, or your business, or whatever, we are here to help with different causes, and we highly have interest in helping other Bible teachers, pastors, and other people who share the word of Christ get around. But we also help businesses that are for-profit and nonprofits to be heard with their cause. If you'd like to have a series and someone on your team to be our co-host as part of the project, you can schedule with us at calendly.com/JENNS books and more. That way you'll be able to visit with me, the owner, Jay Whitaker, as well as one of the team members that we currently have, and we can work out what will work with you as far as both schedules and frequency and so forth. And so then again, a reminder is that this link is for a social media candidate, public relations / press release candidate, and a virtual assistant, or people interested in making a show on our channel. Please spread the news, tell other people about this, and share with them our link, whichever one it may be, based on what interest they have. Or be sure to share with other people who may want to just listen and hear us for entertainment. And be sure to subscribe. Over to you, Emily.
We'd like to thank everybody, John and Kurt, and for coming on, and for everybody tuning in. Or any questions, comments, concerns, and so on, you can get a hold of us at jawscoffeechat@gmail.com, and get back to you as soon as we can. And to please remember to check out all of our social media pages and interact with those. And on behalf of our next Jaws Christ Talk will be next Monday at 4:15 p.m. Central. And so on behalf of Jen and Kurt and the Jaws Coffee Chat, we wish you all a safe and productive week, and stay happy.